At 30 years old, he held a typical office job and cherished his favorite ramen. Occasionally, he recalled his past life as an immensely powerful mage from another realm. Since magic held no place in modern Japan, he took a pragmatic approach. He began traveling between worlds. For him, it was about maintaining a work-life balance. Working by day, seeking adventure by night. His life was simple, without drama or destiny, just a pursuit of good vibes. But soon, circumstances pushed him into a party of formidable adventurers, mostly women, often entangled in trouble. He realized that even a relaxed existence was never truly straightforward. One day, a few men on the street noticed a girl, remarking that she must be one of the Valkyries, powerful women who despise men. She then pulled a man aside, leaving others uncertain if he would be safe. Later, inside a tavern, several women gathered with a man, whispering about something he couldn't understand, as he usually stayed in the shadows. How did it all come to this? Earlier in his office, someone had loudly called him Kyo, warning him about a serious problem. Approaching his boss, he bowed, reminded himself he was just a regular worker, and suddenly realized that his job resembled school, focused more on being polite than on actual effort. He wished it would end because he longed for some good food. That's when a new ramen shop opened nearby, serving spicy ramen. Something shifted inside him. As he looked away, he remembered that in his previous life he was a magician. His boss, with a displeased look, snapped at him, demanding clarification. Embarrassed, he questioned if anyone was even listening. He quickly apologized, finished his workday, and headed home, pondering the sudden influx of memories from his past. Once inside, he used a spell to conjure water and was astonished when it responded. He exclaimed loudly that there was too much water and found controlling it more difficult than expected. Deciding to reduce the flow, he directed the water into a plate. Minutes later, he marveled that he had boiled noodles with magic, something a kettle could have managed more easily. Wishing himself bon appetit, he wondered if his magic was responsible. The memories grew clearer. He had enjoyed spicy food back in his previous life. Despite this, he understood that using magic here would be risky. If anyone discovered his abilities, who knew what could happen? Dangerous misunderstandings or worse. Besides, the world's advanced technology rendered magic mostly unnecessary. Their science had progressed enough to mimic magical effects. Still, he surmised that perhaps some magic might still work. He softly spoke the word teleport and suddenly found himself in a different room. To his surprise, it worked. This was the world he had known before, and with it, the knowledge that preservation magic still functioned. He discovered a skeleton in the room and began taking its belongings. Grateful to his former self, he believed this loot might prove useful. As he exited the mansion, he reflected on his past life as a star mage, a rare magic specialization unlocked only after mastering all elemental disciplines. His ability to teleport stemmed from studying the connection between soul and body, a skill that allowed him to navigate space effortlessly. His nearly endless bag, a gift from his teacher, stored all he deemed necessary. Planning to return here over the weekend, he then transported himself to the modern era, where he had grown quite fond of Japanese cuisine and otaku culture. Adjusting to life in another world permanently seemed daunting. Back in his apartment, he considered improving his presentation. 3 months later, in a forest, he faced a massive monster. With his signature stone projectile spell, he launched a fast-moving stone, striking the creature in the head and killing it instantly. Breathing a sigh of relief, he recognized the importance of bleeding it out first. He then butchered the carcass, contemplating wrapping and freezing the meat with magic. Since the enchanted bag slowed time, the meat would remain fresh for about 3 months. All that remained was acquiring a mana stone. On his journey home, he stopped by the guild and the butcher. At the guild, a worker named Misha spotted him and greeted him, calling him Tyler. He responded, handing her an orc's mana stone. She expressed gratitude, and he marveled at the synergy between magic and technology. She stepped back to examine the stone, noting that this mana stone, along with his reward for slaying the orc, was now in her hands. He regarded her and prepared to leave, but she called him back. Turning to her, he asked if he still planned to remain alone. She looked puzzled and inquired about the reason behind his question. He apologized, explaining she could disregard it. For now, he preferred not to seek out a group. He had made a rule, the constant movement between this world, discard, and Japan, to avoid standing out. Only by blending in could he maintain his peaceful double life. 300 years had passed since his previous life, and artifacts from that time had become rare and valuable. Using powerful relics or revealing his true strength could attract unwanted attention. Discretion was essential to prevent others from uncovering his past or his connections to Japan. Therefore, he stayed in mid-sized cities, where the average power level provided a buffer. Misha mentioned that if he advanced in rank, he could earn more. Such an accomplished mage should join a party, she said. He declined politely, explaining that he preferred to live at his own pace, enjoying himself without overextending. As he prepared to leave, he said farewell, but she asked him to wait. Afterwards, Kyo went to the butcher's shop to sell the orc meat. Stepping outside, he reflected that the quantity he had was just enough to avoid suspicion. His earnings amounted to 2 silver and 5 copper coins, sufficient to cover his needs for 3 days. Later, he arrived at an inn where a girl named Anna greeted him warmly. He responded in kind and inquired if she was again sweeping leaves today. She nodded, saying her parents were busy at the tavern, and she was helping out as best she could. Using a bit of magic, Kyo began gathering the leaves into a pile and offered to help her. She was surprised but appreciated the gesture, to which he replied smugly that he often stays at the inn without ordering anything. He suggested this could be considered his way of showing gratitude. She thanked him and noticed the grate he had brought. Curious, she asked what he was planning. He explained he was about to have a barbecue. Arranging the grate over the leaves, he placed the meat on top and ignited a fire using magic. He mentioned that he had recently acquired orc meat and asked if she would like to try it. She happily agreed. Kyo carefully cut the meat into neat pieces, fried them, and once cooked, skewered the portions. Anna took a piece, started eating, and expressed her delight at how tasty it was. Her face lit up with happiness, and Kyo began eating too, nodding in approval, noting that it turned out quite well. Looking around, he searched for something and said it was time to try a new flavor. Curious, Anna asked what he had in mind. He revealed a bottle of sauce and explained that a dip would enhance the taste. He poured it over the meat. After sampling it herself, Anna's eyes widened with surprise, remarking that the sauce was both sweet and salty, blending all the flavors beautifully. Kyo also smiled, pleased with the result, mentioning that it was a family recipe, a secret sauce handed down through generations. He added that garlic helps eliminate the gamey taste, calling it an excellent choice. Raising a finger, he warned her that the sauce might leave her breath smelling strong. Embarrassed, she exclaimed loudly about what kind of disgusting thing he had given her to eat, but then she admitted that she couldn't get enough of the taste. Kyo chuckled, glad she enjoyed it. He reflected that his days drifted by in a simple, lazy rhythm, working just enough to get by and enjoying life whenever possible. There were no world-ending threats or epic battles, just everyday life in this world, which didn't seem so bad. Later, he returned to the guild where Misha informed him that the reward for the goblins and mana stones totaled 1 silver and 3 copper coins. He glanced aside and saw a sign announcing that the special of the day was earthboar steak. Curious, he asked if earthboar was available now. She confirmed and explained that they had caught too much and needed to sell it quickly. He mused that they might even eat at the inn today. With a cheerful smile, she suggested they might grab a drink, since he was about to have a snack. She was free at the moment. He reflected that, besides adventuring, the guild had a tavern, a themed cafe mainly for adventurers, but it was pricey, so he rarely ate there. Today he sought affordable food, so it was time to part ways. She called him a cheapskate in a disgruntled tone, but he simply ignored her remark. An adventurer named Marcus greeted him warmly, and he responded with a nod, inquiring about his friend's well-being. Marcus's face lit up as he shared that today he had sold a red orc for 3 gold coins. which he found amusing. He chuckled and asked if Marcus was still hunting goblins solo. Marcus was an odd mage. His strange habits made him an object of curiosity among adventurers who would kneel to join a party with someone like him. Yet Marcus refused, claiming that was not his style. He then invited him to join for a meal, but Kyo sat across the table, thinking that he kept many secrets and preferred to work alone. Marcus smiled gently, assuring that he wasn't worried about him but was willing to help if needed. Kyo took his words at face value, noting that beneath his stern exterior, Marcus was a good person who didn't truly open up. He addressed him as Tyler and asked if he'd noticed anything unusual lately. Tyler didn't understand and replied earnestly that monsters had become more aggressive, and Marcus had been inviting him to dinner more frequently. Tyler had a gut feeling that something was stirring deep in the forest, pushing monsters toward the edge of the Garl forest. He considered it pointless to dwell on it, believing that whatever was destined to happen would happen. Marcus was upset by this and raised his voice, insisting that as an adventurer, he should care more. After finishing his meal, Tyler wiped his face, reflecting that he had only lived here for a few months and was more attached to his homeland, Japan. Calmly, he stated that he wasn't the one investigating the strange occurrences. Suddenly, the attention of nearby adventurers shifted as a girl entered the tavern. They exclaimed in surprise that she was Valkyrie Elsa, a Mythal-ranked adventurer. It was the first time anyone had seen a Valkyrie in person. Tyler glanced at her, recalling that he'd heard of Valkyries, an all-women group known for their disdain of men. She approached him, addressed him as Tyler, and asked if he had a free moment. Perceiving trouble, Tyler politely declined, intending to leave. However, she quickly stepped in his way, claiming she knew his secret. Surprised, he masked his reaction and insisted he had no idea what she was talking about. She simply nodded and declared she would reveal his secret so everyone could hear. Her words piqued his curiosity, making him wonder what she might truly know. He considered the possibility that he might have to silence her permanently. In the worst-case scenario, leaving the country could become inevitable. She had managed to persuade him that he should listen to her, which surprised him. As she began to walk away, she suggested they continue their conversation elsewhere, prompting him to follow her without hesitation. He then contacted Marcus, telling him they would meet again soon. She had a specific place in mind. Was that acceptable? He didn't voice any objections and kept pace with her. Meanwhile, the adventurers watched their exchanging and wondered what her intentions might be with this secretive mage. Kyo judged by their reactions that she was beyond the reach of most men. He loathed drawing attention, yet this time he had little choice. How did she discover his secret? He aimed to avoid trouble but knew he couldn't afford to worsen the situation either. He decided to see how events unfolded from this point. After some walking, they arrived at a modest building, and Elsa announced, "This is where we live." He followed her inside, puzzled by her words. Did she mean all the Valkyries already knew? He hoped their encounter wouldn't escalate beyond a peaceful chat. Still, he remained alert, aware there was a chance, however slim, that he might face attack or threats. Prepared for potential conflict, he gripped his staff tightly when he heard her call her name. From the second floor, a girl looked at them and greeted, "Welcome." She introduced herself as Lisa, explaining she was back and that this was Tyler. He nodded in acknowledgement, while she exclaimed loudly in surprise that she had brought a guy home. Both of them appeared somewhat bewildered. Then voices of other girls emerged, expressing disbelief. 3 more girls stepped into view, eyes wide with astonishment. Soon, they gathered around the table, laid out food, and began to eat. The protagonist observed this scene with disbelief, feeling completely thrown off. His initial instincts to fight for his life faded, replaced by a sense of foolishness for worrying so much. He turned to Elsa and asked if he could leave now. She refused, reminding him, "Didn't they need to talk? Have you already forgotten?" She assured him that after dinner, everything would calm down. An unfamiliar girl approached, placing a bowl of soup beside him, and asked, "His name is Tyler, right? Why not eat some soup and rest?" He judged that he wasn't particularly tired, but since she insisted, he started eating. To his surprise, the soup was delicious. She extended her hand and said she was glad he liked it. Her name was Widow, and she was pleased to meet him. He shook her hand, noting her callous skin and strong grip, evidence of years wielding a two-handed sword. She waved her hand happily, remarking that his hands were so soft. Lisa then called out, apologizing for shouting and not greeting him properly. She introduced herself as a scout. Pleased to meet him, he shook her hand and thought she seemed genuine. He was so immersed in his thoughts that he did not notice her footsteps approaching. Even when he entered the house, her presence remained undetected until her voice broke the silence. Her skills were truly extraordinary. She gestured to the side and said, "And this is Lulu." The girl with the wide-brimmed hat introduced herself as a fellow mage, just like him. She shaded her face with her hat, and he found himself thinking he had seen her somewhere before. Elsa glanced aside, called Iris, and invited her to sit and share a meal. On the opposite side of the room, a girl clutching a bow and arrow looked serious as she declared her refusal to dine in the same room with a man. Politely, she insisted it was important and demanded that he put down his weapon. She carefully placed her arrow back into the quiver, explaining she was doing this solely for her own safety. The main character observed her and thought that, from the very beginning, he had wondered why they had earned a reputation for being man-haters. She looked directly at him, introduced herself, and warned that a single wrong move might be met with deadly force. Her words made him slightly uneasy, and he suspected she was the one primarily responsible. Elsa then announced that, since introductions were complete, they could proceed to the main purpose of their meeting. She addressed him as Tyler and mentioned that she had deduced the secret he was hiding. Her eyes fixed on his oversized bag. Immediately, he felt a sense of relief, understanding her implication, yet he hesitated to admit it. Calmly, he asked why she thought that. Lisa explained that she guessed from its weight and sound, noting that her inspection of him exchanging orc meat at the butcher suggested he carried a lot, since after a hunt, one would typically have a sizable amount of stuff. Yet, his bag was silent, hinting at its contents. He nodded in agreement, acknowledging her insight. It was an oversized bag, he admitted willingly. He didn't mind, but he wondered what they planned to do about it. Elsa explained they wanted to investigate recent strange happenings in the forest. As he prepared to leave, he thanked them for the meal and took his leave. Elsa suddenly grabbed his hand and loudly urged him not to go so abruptly. Despite his intention to depart, she coughed and explained that they weren't sure what they might need from his bag, so they requested it as a backup. Of course, he would receive an equal share of the rewards, plus extra compensation for the risks and participation in the mission. He remarked that it sounded like he was to be a porter, a surprisingly generous offer. Elsa nodded, emphasizing his importance to their group. Lisa added that they were fortunate to have such perceptive senses. No one else would have noticed. Elsa agreed and assured him they wouldn't tell anyone. However, if he refused, they might get upset and the secret could slip. The main character thought that the job of a porter was unlikely to be dangerous, especially with such a strong team, and that in the worst case, he could simply teleport home. He would eliminate anyone who once knew about the bag, considering it a strategic move. It was a clear win for him. Calmly, he nodded in agreement to accompany them, and they responded happily, urging him to speak quickly about the bag's capacity. He estimated it was roughly as large as a sizable house, which surprised them. Still, he decided not to reveal everything, feeling confident that this estimate was enough for now. She extended her hand, confirming their agreement and welcoming him into the group. He shook her hand, acknowledging, and she praised his decision. If everyone was ready, they planned to depart by the next morning. He raised his hand, explaining he needed some time to settle a few matters first. Might he have a little more time? The following day, his boss asked if he was entirely certain about his choice. He had recently begun working full-time, but he quietly smiled and responded that he yearned for a peaceful rural life. To him, being a mage in one world and working remotely 3 days a week began to feel like leading a double life. Later, he sat inside a tent deep within the forest, typing away on his laptop, feeling relieved he had just managed to make it to morning. Afterward, he took his staff and cast healing magic on himself. Stepping outside, he was greeted by the girls, who wished him good morning and announced they were ready to continue their journey. He, looking a bit weary, chuckled and wondered where his peaceful life had vanished. They moved deeper into the woods, where Lisa suddenly pointed out that 5 earth wolves approached from the east. Widow swiftly drew her sword and charged to attack, slicing down the first creature with a powerful strike. Another wolf approached, but Iris, nearby, killed it effortlessly. She turned to thank her, praising her skill. They pressed forward, battling wolves along the way. Lulu stood beside him, remarking that their progress was as expected. She asked if he was unhurt, and Widow assured her she was fine, emphasizing there was no need to drain mana on her. The further they advanced, the more numerous the monsters became. The other girls caught up, noting that their strength was growing. They needed to stay vigilant. Lisa, glancing aside, spotted something and loudly warned of the increasing danger. They quickly prepared for battle, and he cast a stone projectile spell, killing an approaching monster. The group was momentarily surprised, and he sighed with relief, noting he nearly hit his companions. They marveled at his speed, and Lulu excitedly remarked how impressive it was to enhance a weak earth spell with a charge powerful enough to kill an earth wolf with a single strike, even without incantation. Widow asked whether this truly was remarkable, and Lulu eagerly agreed, discussing magic enthusiastically. Elsa turned to him, apologizing, admitting she sometimes got carried away. He simply responded that it was okay. He believed she was overly praising him, which made him feel somewhat awkward. She, in turn, insisted she hadn't spoken about him so often. Elsa then asked why, despite his impressive skills, he remained stuck at the silver rank. He admitted this was a question he was frequently asked. She pointed out that answer was obvious. Simply avoiding the question wouldn't change anything. If he didn't want to talk about it, that was fine. They needed to gather mana stones, then set out on their journey. Gradually, they ventured deeper into the dense Garel forest, moving in silence. The Valkyries faced monsters with ease, dispatching them without breaking a sweat. That night, the protagonist quietly worked to soothe his exhaustion with magic, healing his fatigue. One evening, Lulu knocked on his door, waking him from his thoughts. He asked if she was on night watch duty with him. She nodded affirmatively. He realized that while physical weariness could be eased, mental fatigue persisted, leaving him in a constant state of exhaustion. Resentful of being cooped up at home, he longed for peace. Lulu then asked for his forgiveness, explaining she was nervous because she had seen his magic performed without incantations. Surprised, he replied that passion was, in fact, a positive trait. His teacher used to say that a mage should always strive to extend their limits. Lulu chuckled, saying her mother, too, had been a mage and had spoken similarly. He commented that her mother must have trained her well. As he looked at Lulu, he thought she possessed true magecraft skills, her approach more aligned with the traditional methods of his era, rather than the modern trend of rapid, multi-strike spells. In his time, mages aimed to cast slowly, pooling mana for a single, devastating attack, something Lulu's style resembled. Perhaps her teacher favored that old-school approach. Shyly, Lulu then asked if he could observe her magic and offer advice to help her improve. His immediate impression was that her eyes were reminiscent of their shared teachers. Quietly, he mentally addressed her as Lulu. Perplexed, she asked what he had said. He waved his hand dismissively, telling her to forget it. Lulu pressed on, inquiring if he knew her grandmother, Starfall Merlia. She was a renowned elven mage, a master of celestial magic. He was taken aback. It was hard to believe Lulu was descended from such a legendary figure. Merlia had combined elven spirits with human spells, elevating magic to new heights. She was a true sage, his former teacher, and also his first love. Her absence left a void. He would never see her again. Tears momentarily welled in his eyes, but he quickly wiped them away, asking Lulu to forgive his moment of emotion. Mentioning her name triggered memories in the girl. She was surprised and said everything was fine. The protagonist hesitated, expressing doubt that this could truly be her, as the time gap was too immense. Valkyrie admitted he had a point. The historical distance did cast doubt. He explained that Lulu was the granddaughter of the legendary star Maria. Lulu confirmed this, which was why she often covered her ears. Associating with such a celebrity could bring trouble. He silently reflected on his teacher's reputation, considering her a true legend. Out loud, he offered to teach Lulu in exchange for her openness about herself. If she was willing, he asked her to share more about her life. Valkyrie looked at him with surprise, curious about his motives. He promised to teach her magic, and in return, she would reveal all she knew. Deciding he couldn't abandon these girls, he felt a responsibility to prevent the granddaughter of his teacher from suffering under such a burden. The following day, he began instructing Lulu. He summoned flames and expertly roasted small pieces of meat, impressing the Valkyries with his skill. After a couple of days on their forest expedition, the protagonist noticed he had grown somewhat accustomed to the girls. Lulu excitedly announced, "The meat is well roasted," while Widow commented, "It looks delicious." He responded confidently, "And it tastes just as good." Turning to Lulu, he suggested she try to do the same. She activated her magic, but her control was lacking. Instead of a gentle flame, she produced a blaze that burned the meat like a matchstick. Elsa commented sadly, "Their meat is burnt." The protagonist reassured them quickly, telling them not to worry. There was plenty left in the bag. Widow observed that magic without incantations was more challenging than it appeared. He thought about his cautious life as a merchant, realizing that social skills could be useful here too. Still, a barrier remained. An invisible wall of misunderstanding between him and Iris. Kuruma took some meat from his bag, grilled it, and distributed pieces to the girls, offering some to Iris as well. She folded her arms and turned her face away, showing her disinterest. Later that night, during his shift with Elsa, he asked about their mission. Did they really need him? Elsa was initially confused, asking what he meant. He explained that the Valkyries of the Mythal rank were exceptional, competent in teamwork and combat, but having him around might upset the group's balance, increasing risks. Elsa agreed he had a point but believed they would need him in the future. She handed him an invigorating herb, for which he expressed gratitude. He then inquired about what she envisioned for the future. She described how the Valkyries, including herself, Iris, and Widow, came from groups that had disbanded due to tensions between men and women. Iris had been especially traumatized by this, and when Lisa and Lulu later joined them, they also developed an aversion to men. She explained that growth meant eventually overcoming these prejudices and learning patience. The bag of supplies was merely a reason to work together with him. He smiled, understanding her perspective perfectly. He realized he was a test subject in their plan. She observed that out of all the men, he seemed the most harmless. Although they hadn't anticipated him concealing his strength, the protagonist dryly noted, "He's full of surprises." Elsa reflected thoughtfully, admitting she never imagined she'd see Lulu smile while conversing with a guy until recently. Such a scene seemed impossible to her. Chewing on a blade of grass, the protagonist regarded her quietly, feeling as if an awakening had taken place within him. After a moment's pause, the group resumed their journey. Elsa remarked on the oddity of the situation, noting that as they delved deeper into the forest, the number of monsters noticeably decreased. Widow agreed, observing that only recently they had encountered many more. Lulu commented that they had encountered creatures usually dwelling deep in the woods. The protagonist concluded that the forest's ecosystem was clearly out of balance, suspecting something deep within was driving the monsters outward, potentially threatening the city's safety. He proposed to the Valkyries that they turn back and have Lisa attempt to track the creatures. Elsa agreed it was a sensible plan but recalled that last time they killed a monster, the blood attracted others, turning the scene into a chaotic slaughter. Iris noted that this time, their primary goal was gathering information. Despite the risks, they needed to uncover what was happening. Elsa concurred and suggested it was time to act. She asked if everyone was in agreement, then turned to Lisa, asking if she could handle the task. The girl assured her she could be relied upon. With the decision made, the Valkyries retreated with the protagonist, leaving Lisa at an observation point. Suddenly, Lisa pointed ahead, signaling, "There's something there." Iris approached her swiftly, Elsa attempting to stop her, but Iris insisted she didn't need help, confident she could handle it alone. The protagonist thought cynically, "Is she joking? This is reckless." Elsa's efforts to intervene again proved futile as Iris bolted forward, with Widow and the protagonist right behind her. As she ran, the girl muttered, "I think Iris is scared." Surprised, the protagonist asked, "What's she afraid of?" Widow realized that things were shifting, perhaps seeing everyone grow friendly with him. Iris believed there might be even more men around and wanted to prove they could handle themselves. The protagonist cursed, feeling responsible, but Widow reassured him it wasn't his fault. Still, Iris's trust in men had been shattered due to previous events involving a man. Suddenly, a piercing cry interrupted the silence, and they saw a black dragon soaring through the sky, heading straight for Iris. Widow shouted in alarm, "This is bad. It's coming right for her." The protagonist cursed and hurried his pace. Meanwhile, Iris sat perched in a tree, aiming her bow at the monster. She reflected bitterly on her hatred for men, how they constantly stared at her with disgusting glances and looked down on women. Frustrated, she realized she would never cooperate with them, which was why she joined the women's group. After releasing her arrow, Iris exhaled regretfully, feeling they had managed well enough on their own before the main character was involved. The monster roared in pain, causing her to leap from the tree, resolutely declaring, "Women don't need men." She despised men and harbored guilt for that loathing. In that instant, a fierce surge of ominous energy nearly swept her away, forcing her to barely maintain her footing. Suddenly, a colossal black dragon materialized before her, its enormous maw opening wide as it roared fiercely. Iris froze, stunned. Unexpectedly, memories flooded her mind, vivid and uncontrollable. She recalled how, as the second daughter of humble farmers, she was regarded as the most beautiful girl in the village. One day, Aaron approached her with a flower he had found in a nearby clearing, telling her it suited her perfectly. She tried to return the gesture, but he quickly ran off, promising they would meet again. Iris also remembered 3 girls standing nearby, one of whom secretly liked Aaron. With a sullen expression, one of them accused her of stealing Aaron's affection. She felt deep frustration. She knew how she felt about him. She attempted to reassure her that her feelings weren't what she seemed, but the girl snapped back, questioning why Iris had accepted the flower if she didn't care. The girl's words cut deeply, expressing her hatred. Then, she pushed Iris aside, tears streaming down her face, yelling that she was always in her way. She believed that being cute gave her license to do anything. Valkyrie sank to the ground, overwhelmed by a sense of helplessness, feeling she hadn't done anything to deserve this treatment. To her, beauty was a heavy burden. Outcast by everyone, she had always chosen solitude. She fled into the forest, letting her tears flow freely. Her grandmother appeared, reproaching her for going into the woods alone and bothering her. Iris poured out her story, tears choking her voice. Her grandmother gently placed her hand on her shoulder, explaining that sometimes solitude is necessary in tough times. But, she added, to survive alone, one must learn to protect oneself. What if, instead of her, some monster had appeared? Iris knew her grandmother was a skilled hunter, from whom she learned how to hunt and shoot with a bow. It seemed she had a natural talent for it. 2 years later, her father announced her engagement to Catan, the village chief's son. Iris was furious. Hadn't she expressed her desire to go to the city and pursue archery? Had her wishes even been considered? Her father dismissed her objections. What did it matter? Once she married Catan, her future would be assured. Enraged, she stormed into her room. Her father called after her, asking where she was going. Iris grabbed a quiver of arrows and her bow and ran out, determined to leave the village behind. Everyone rushed after her, trying to stop her, but her mind was set on leaving, to become the greatest archer and forge the life she wanted. As she made her escape, Catan suddenly lunged and knocked her to the ground. Pinning her beneath him, he hissed threateningly. He attempted to take advantage of her helplessness, but Iris kicked him off and escaped. The villagers shouted for him not to let her get away. She crouched behind a towering boulder, striving to conceal herself completely. The villagers had already picked up her faint tracks and were closing in. Using her enhanced senses and the hunting skills her grandmother had passed down, Iris believed she had escaped. From that moment, her disdain for men took root, fueling her resolve to survive unaided. She aimed to prove she could withstand any challenge on her own, defending her territory. Now, facing this dreadful monster, she silently begged her allies for forgiveness. Iris shut her eyes, brace for the inevitable end. Suddenly, a figure appeared beside her. A protective barrier shimmered around her as he asked if she was unhurt. She gazed at him in wonder, uttering his name. He explained he'd arrived just in time, deploying the shield. He was no stranger to battling dragons. With a wave of his hand, he summoned a gust of wind through a conduit, which, combined with his magic, lifted him into the air. The dragon looked up in surprise and then lunged toward him. Iris thought to herself, "Perfect, let it come up here." She knew she wouldn't want a forest fire ignited down below. She studied her foe. Crimson scales, a slightly swollen throat, an unmistakable fire dragon. Had it been fully grown, her chances would be slim. As a juvenile, she believed she could triumph if she gave her all, an effort that hadn't been needed in over 3 centuries. The mage summoned hellfire, whipping the air with a stormy blast to attack the beast. The dragon spat a torrent of flame, which he quickly extinguished by adding more fire magic for reinforcement. Even weakened, the attack remained potent. That eliminated the possibility of this being an adult dragon disguising itself with illusion magic. Within his staff, a philosopher's stone lay embedded, an artifact crafted by his teacher. This gemstone could restore his magic, controlling the roots of all mystical power and amplifying his spells. The rings and staff he wore combined 11 magical tools, enabling instant access to every element of magic, perfect for spontaneous combat. Though he lacked his mentor's innate talent, he had learned to master all accessible techniques, shaping his fighting style into a practical, disciplined craft. He activated additional spells, Tidal Wave and Gaia Strike, then summoned 0-point energy to focus his attack. An explosion erupted as he watched the aftermath unfold. When the smoke cleared, the dragon reappeared on the horizon. He cursed under his breath, almost hitting his target. Did the creature truly dodge? If even a juvenile dragon could evade, his teacher in the heavens would surely scold him harshly. Re-equipping his staff, he reflected on how long he dreamed of mastering the Starfall spell. He had dedicated himself to recreating it, following the footprints of its creator with relentless effort and ultimately succeeding with great difficulty. Now he unleashed offensive star magic, summoning a small meteor aimed directly at the beast. The explosion was truly awe-inspiring. A massive crater gouged into the earth, with the defeated dragon sprawled at its depths. The protagonist, feeling somewhat self-conscious, wondered if he had pushed his abilities too far. His excitement was barely contained. He was eager to gauge what he could now achieve. Although his capacity to surpass the silver rank was no longer a secret, he had no intention of showcasing his newfound strength recklessly. Perhaps it was unwise to have engaged the dragon at all. Yet, to avoid it would have meant allowing Lulu, his mentor's granddaughter, and her allies to fall. Once they had descended deep enough, an inevitable confrontation with the beast was only a matter of time. Accepting this quest had made the end of his carefree life a certainty from the start. His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the Valkyries. They called out in surprise, their faces reflecting pure astonishment. He understood immediately. They looked at him as if he were extraordinary. Still, he accepted the consequences without resistance. He was no ordinary mage. He was a man working as an office clerk back on Earth. In moments like these, He had to rely on every ounce of his life and professional experience to navigate through unfamiliar challenges. The protagonist lowered himself, falling to his knees, and bowed deeply before the Valkyries, asking them to keep what they had witnessed a secret. Elsa urged him, "Is he asking them to do that? Please, lift your head." Obediently, he responded, raising his gaze. Elsa then thanked him, saying, "First, I want to thank you for saving Iris." She turned to her partner and asked her to express her gratitude as well. Iris, visibly tense, also thanked the protagonist explicitly. He, in turn, asked nervously if she was wounded or unwell. Her cheeks were flushed as she snapped irritably, "What did he say? I'm perfectly fine." Afterward, she buried her face in Elsa's shoulder. Confused, the protagonist wondered if perhaps the dragon's heat affected her. Elsa wanted to return to her earlier words, but Lulu interrupted, turning admiringly toward him and asking, "How did you do that meteor? Did you create it or summon it?" She couldn't believe he had defeated the dragon without a scratch, and she was eager to understand how he had mastered stellar magic and those mysterious rings of his. What exactly were they? Elsa patted Lulu on the back and promised to ask him later. The Valkyrie turned to the protagonist and said she needed an explanation since she was as shocked as Lulu. She added that she had always sensed he was unusual but didn't realize he was so powerful. Unfortunately, concealing this would not be possible. The situation had to be reported officially, including the cause of the disturbance and the defeating of the dragon. He replied that they could discuss it, but he preferred that the Valkyries be credited solely for their investigation and victory, insisting he had played no part in the fight. Elsa, indignantly, asked what he was saying. She pointed out that he was the one who had defeated the dragon and that he deserved the credit. The protagonist smiled and told them to consider the victory their own, emphasizing that he did not seek recognition. Elsa looked at him with a mixture of confusion and concern. "That's quite selfless of him," she murmured. "Is he absolutely sure about this?" The main character confirmed his certainty and explained that living simply and peacefully was what mattered most to him. Elsa, slightly embarrassed, noted, "Well, they probably couldn't refuse the wishes of their savior." She then asked the others if everyone agreed, and no one objected. With that, the investigation in Garl Forest was officially wrapped up, and the town of Ira erupted in celebration. Residents gathered to rejoice and share their excitement. Some whispered about the dragon they had supposedly slain, even bringing its carcass back in a seemingly endless bag. The story went that a dragon had been defeated by an all-female team of Valkyries, with the task handled by the National Guard. The protagonist, lazily sipping his drink, thought the scene resembled a full-fledged festival. One knight asked him, "He was there, wasn't he? This is unbelievable." The main character nodded in agreement. The knight pressed further, asking who the true star of the team was. The protagonist considered that since the person he was about to mention was the teacher's granddaughter, it made sense to name her. He then revealed Lulu's name. At that moment, Iris appeared beside him, her expression irritated. "She's finally found him," she said curtly. The protagonist was startled and called her name, but Iris sharply told him to keep quiet. She grabbed his collar and dragged him out of the tavern, insisting he was coming with her. Surprised, he asked where they were headed. The man who had spoken to him before shouted to his comrades, "He just talked to Iris." The soldiers, skeptical, wondered what he was talking about and suspected he'd had too much to drink. As Iris and the main character passed, the knights saluted them. "Glory to the new dragon slayers," they cheered. Outside the city, as the girl led him away, she pinched his ear in frustration. "Seriously, does he even realize how long she's been searching for him?" she snapped, pulling him along despite his protests about the pain. She told him to shut up and led him to her house. At that moment, Widow called out, asking how long he'd been gone. Everyone had been waiting. The protagonist was surprised by her attire. Had she been cooking? She looked at him with confusion and asked, "What?" then burst into laughter. "It suits her, doesn't it? Strong, tough, and suddenly wearing an apron." He disagreed, saying, "No, actually, she looks great." I think she usually wears practical clothes. It's a nice contrast. Widow, realizing she might have said too much, quickly announced, "The party's ready. Let them in." Iris appeared slightly irritated. When asked, she explained it was a celebration for the end of their mission, and she had personally gone to fetch him since he'd been away for a while. The main character understood everything now. Once inside, Widow told him she had poured her heart into her cooking, warning him to prepare for a surprise. He remarked, "She's a good cook." The girl responded, "Her mother trained her thoroughly when she was a young bride." She cheered, noting that Valky handled all the household chores. The protagonist nodded thoughtfully and remarked, "She would make an excellent wife." Both girls glanced at him in surprise, exchanging silent looks. Widow then explained calmly, "Her father is quite strict. He declared he would only accept a husband stronger than himself." Meanwhile, Iris softly confided to the main character that their playful flirting made her feel the need to step in. He asked in surprise, "What exactly does that mean?" Elsa raised her glass and declared that everyone had now gathered, so the celebration could begin. The girls spoke gravely, emphasizing how recent events had made them realize how much they still had to learn. In different circumstances, their journey might have already concluded, but they were only here thanks to the protagonist's efforts. Out of gratitude, she expressed her thanks to him. She also turned to her colleagues, acknowledging that their combined skills had enabled the successful completion of their investigation, and she offered her appreciation. As a result, their reputation grew ever more prominent. However, this also meant heightened scrutiny from others, as their actions could lead some to suspect the protagonist's extraordinary magical abilities. Valkyries, she explained, were not the type to boast or ride on the coattails of others' achievements. They preferred to earn recognition through their own strength, especially after their victory over the dragon. Consequently, they now celebrated with drinks in hand, raising their glasses high. The main character reflected with a smile that this gathering resembled more a war council than a festive occasion. Initially, he had considered teleporting if matters became tense, but he had grown quite attached to these moments, appreciating the camaraderie.